Hello and welcome into a Tuesday without Sterling. I'm Joshua Brisco. Usually I get the enjoyable, cushy job of just sitting back, letting Stu drive, and having a little bit of fun on a Tuesday. We're still going to have fun. It's just going to be you, dear viewer, and me here on this side of the camera. We got plenty to talk about today, not including the thing that I've been spending a lot of my day doing. I'll give a brief connection there if you're checking in and saying, Josh, are you going to talk about the new big thing? I'll talk about it a little bit more a little later this afternoon over on Only Weird Games. We make each other listen to ourselves talk about our steps and career evolutions and all that on that show all the time. I won't do the whole acceptance speech here, but if you've had your eye on social media today, I'm joining the Chiefs Radio Network team to do pregame and postgame on the Chiefs Radio Network this season, which is going to be an absolute blast. But again, I talk about myself in that way plenty. I'll do it more on Weird Games today. In the meantime, we've got actual training camp, not just news, but a practice. Now, we're not to the point where you can start making these sweeping generalizations about how the guys are looking in pads, having some actual contact. It's still early, very early as can be. But I do think we got one piece of legitimate news today and two pieces of legitimate news as the guys were reporting to training camp there in St. Joe. We'll get through a bunch of that. We'll talk about George Karlaftis getting his massive contract extension. I'll tell you why I was surprised to see that deal come down, or at least surprised when the first reporting came out that that deal was on the way. And then we'll spend a little bit of time on what makes sense and what was a good surprise and what was maybe, I don't know. I don't want to say any of it was a bad surprise. I don't think anybody comes out of this with a bad result, but it was a surprise. And so I feel like we can all admit that whenever we're maybe a bit surprised by the order of operations, as Trent McDuffie and his contract seems a little bit out in the distance now. George Karlaftis is going to be here for many years to come. Let's go ahead and start with the news of today, though, just because it is today. Plus, if you want to fire off your questions or comments in the chat, please feel free to do that. It's just you and me here today, so if you have a question or a thought that I think is particularly interesting, I'll read it and we'll see if we can kick off a little conversation that way too. But the injury news you need to know about, and this directly informs the big piece of news that happened in St. Joe today. Andy Reid gets out there in St. Joe, has the sort of opening introductory press conference, and tells you that Jawan Taylor, this team's starting right tackle, and Christian Fulton, presumed CB2, are both starting training camp on the PUP list with knee injuries. PUP physically unable to perform. And this isn't like the midseason, in-season PUP list where you're out for a consistent period of time. You're out for a minimum of this many weeks. Right now, they're unable to perform in training camp, in practice right now. Andy said, we're hoping it's relatively fast. Jawan's probably closer right now in terms of those guys having a chance to return. I'm like a level 6.5 out of 10, maybe a 7 worried in terms of Christian Fulton. Just not the way you want to start a new tenure with a new team, a guy who seems like such a perfect fit. I've been stoked about Christian Fulton. Sterling has been stoked about Christian Fulton. We've talked about him a lot just on Tuesdays here. I think that fit makes perfect sense. I think that signing was excellent. You got to be on the field to actually see the benefits of that. And today, I saw at least one report. Can't remember who out from St. Joe had this. So my apologies to whoever was braving the St. Joe Sun to note that in the three corner sets, Shamari Connor was back in the slot as Jalen Watson and Trent McDuffie were on the outside. The reason I like the Christian Fulton signing so much is because you want to see Watson and Fulton on the outside with McDuffie in the slot. Again, something to keep an eye on. I'm not, his season's not over. We don't even know that his month or a couple of weeks are out of the question. But Andy Reid saying they're both on PUP, being Fulton and Jawan Taylor, and saying that Jawan Taylor is closer right now makes me nervous about whatever's going on there with Christian Fulton. We'll keep an eye on it as the weeks go on, but it does seem like it could be a little bit of time for Fulton. The most interesting thing, though, was the door that was opened when Jawan Taylor started on the PUP list. If you've been following this show or just Chiefs football throughout the offseason in a time of the year where you could do anything else, if you're really locked in the Chiefs coverage like we are here, you probably immediately asked what I consider to be kind of the obvious question when Jawaan Taylor goes to the pup list. So, who's playing right tackle when the ones take the field at training camp, as they did today? And then how does that impact who's your starting left tackle? Do those things actually co-inspire to determine who your starting tackles could be, at least at the beginning of training camp? And the answer of will those things lead to one to another appears to be yes. Not only does it lead to something fascinating, it could lead to something resembling a best case scenario. And for me, it underlines a hilarious fact about Josh Simmons. So in the first team lineups in St. Joe today, Josh Simmons is your starting left tackle. Left to right, your first team offensive line, as reported by Nate Taylor of ESPN on socials today. Left to right, your first team offensive line as the Chiefs began training camp with Jawaan Taylor on IR. Left tackle, Josh Simmons. Left guard, Kingsley Suamataia. Center, Creed Humphrey. Right guard, Trey Smith. Right tackle, Jalen Moore. I think in a world where the pads have not come on, we are not in the like second or third day of high intensity padded practice. You can learn other things about players as training camp comes around. But in this position, on day one of training camp, one of the only things that I think can really matter is who's there, who's healthy, and who is penciled in the starting spots as you begin camp. And what we've learned right now, specifically thinking about Josh Simmons here, we have learned that Josh Simmons is healthy enough to be on the field and that on the first day of training camp, he is your starting left tackle as a rookie. Now, I don't think that means Josh Simmons is untouchably guaranteed to be this team starting left tackle in week one. It is way too early to make a call like that. But if he looks good at left tackle from the jump, if the Chiefs see enough from Josh Simmons, physically, mentally, putting it all together, if the Chiefs see enough from Josh Simmons early on to think he's on the right track, whenever Jawaan Taylor's healthy, let's say it's in a week, let's say it's in 2 weeks, whenever it is, Josh Simmons has a little bit of time to get a head start. He has a little bit of time to get a head start. He has a little bit more time to work with his quarterback, with the first team, next to presumably his starting left guard, Kingsley Suamataia, who in a way is also in a battle for that job. But I think we know for pretty much a fact at this point, the Chiefs would love for their starting left tackle and left guard in week one to be Josh Simmons and Kingsley Suamataia, respectively. If Josh Simmons makes no terrible plays, if he is not looking out of his element at left tackle in training camp here, I do not think that Jawaan Taylor's return automatically bumps Jalen Moore to left tackle and Josh Simmons down a peg. I do not think you can assume that that's what will happen when Jawaan Taylor returns. If Simmons looks shaky for any reason, if the knee is anything, if the NFL speed is just not something you want him facing in week one, the Chiefs have some options. They have some redundancies, some fail safes that they obviously didn't have last year, because by the time you get into week two last year, the Chiefs are making the call that, you know what? It's just moving too fast for Kingsley. We got to do something else. If that happens for Simmons, and certainly you hope you can make that call in training camp or in the preseason and not wait for week one, week two to come around and then make a change going into week three. But if Simmons is comfortable in that spot, what would make him give that job up to a guy in Jalen Moore who just got moved, in my opinion, to plan B for him? When they signed Jalen Moore, I assume that, I don't know this, assuming, not knowing, but I assume the idea was, hey, man, you come here and we're going to, most likely, you're going to be our starting left tackle. You're going to be protecting the blind side of Patrick Mahomes for the next year or two. But it really is a 2-year deal. You think, Jalen Moore's got a little bit of experience, certainly more so than Josh Simmons. So if something goes wrong here, maybe Moore's the guy that can flip over to the right side. I don't want to overreact so hard to the first day of training camp that you can just like openly laugh at me in 3 days. I think that would be unhelpful of me. But if Jawan Taylor comes back looking for the right tackle job, I think it might be more of a battle between him and Jalen Moore than it is Josh Simmons and Jalen Moore, or Josh Simmons and Jawan Taylor for that matter. I think if Josh Simmons can play, and this is also what they did with Kingsley last year a little bit. If Josh Simmons can play week 1 starter, NFL level, you don't want him anywhere else. Start your 5-year plan with Josh Simmons at left tackle. Fire it up. Let that be the thing that leads you into the season. And again, if Simmons isn't ready, he doesn't have to be. That was the thing that just wasn't quite true for Kingsley last year. And Wanya Morris was banged up during training camp, and maybe he lost an opportunity to try to hold Kingsley off, and then maybe we never would have seen Kingsley last year. Maybe he would have stepped in midseason, things would have been different, would have been better. We don't know. But the Chiefs are in this position now where they have I believe, three NFL caliber starting tackles to fill 2 positions. That's a good problem. That is a fabulous place to be. Funniest thing is that among those 3 tackles, the one player who has been available, as far as I've been able to tell, for the most offseason activities, for the most on-field work this offseason, has been Josh Simmons. The guy who, when the draft card was turned in, and I'm not taking a shot at anybody because we didn't know, but when the draft card got turned in, there were people wondering, well, his film's great, but is Josh Simmons going to be able to, is he ever going to play football again? Obviously, the Chiefs medical staff had good info. We heard their optimism at the time. We heard Andy Reid's optimism at the time. And maybe Josh Simmons is way outperforming what the Chiefs expected. Maybe he's right on line with what the Chiefs expected. Maybe the Chiefs got lucky. Maybe the Chiefs medical staff is simply good at this exact process. They certainly have had success. I mean, very different situation. But Trey Smith was a similar, like, I don't know if this is a safe medical decision to make. And now Trey Smith's the highest paid guard in football history. But of those 3, the one guy who was out there throughout OTAs and ready day 1 in training camp was the rookie who we were all a little bit afraid wasn't going to play. I think I told you I would have taken him at like the bye week, that I would have taken him around mid-season to be available. And then I still thought the draft pick made sense in that reality. And now we're in a reality where he's maybe the guy, or at least getting the first crack at it. And again, we are talking about practice. We're talking about practice, man. We're talking about off-season activities, the first day of training camp, all of that. But as I've said every step along the way that we've heard about Josh Simmons, what else would you want from him to this point? What else can you do if you're in Josh Simmons' shoes other than keep rehabbing, stay in the playbook, get your opportunity, don't let go? I'm still not 100% planting my flag in Josh Simmons starts week 1 at left tackle. I really feel like there is going to be plenty of branching paths here. And there's a couple of comments that I'm going to come back to that are right there with me. But if things go well, it's his crack at it first. And that's amazing. That's consistent also to Andy Reid over the years. The reason that I think this is such a big deal for him to get that starting spot today is that for the most part, if you're performing well, you're not going to lose your job to injury. Or you're not going to lose your job to the guy coming back from injury, I guess is what I should say. So I guess both of those will be true. I think I said it wrong the first time. But the important clause there is not when you're injured and when you return, it's if you're playing well. If Simmons looks comfortable there, the Chiefs clearly know he has the highest ceiling, both as a player and in his contract. The highest ceiling for the most years to come, who could be on the team the longest. Saw a comment a second ago. Juwan Taylor knows he's in a contract year from Ronson trade. Absolutely. This is essentially a contract year from Juwan Taylor. I have to assume he's working to get back. I don't know what exactly is going on that knee. He had some knee issues last year, kind of nagging. Here's the other thing at left tackle, or actually at both tackle positions. All three of these guys have had injury issues very recently. Josh Simmons is coming off of a major one. Juwan Taylor's missing time right now. Jalen Moore's had a couple little things here and there and had some time off to the side in OTAs, maybe mini camps. Don't quote me on which one. But they've had that rotation. And I assume that all three of them are going to play in this regular season. Not just as like a six lineman thing, but if Juwan Taylor comes back, gets the right tackle job back, and Jalen Moore ends up being your third tackle, an expensive swing tackle for 1 year, which I'm still totally fine with because I have seen the other side and I do not want to go the other way. I assume that Jalen Moore is going to play left tackle for a banged up Josh Simmons for a game or two. A game or two at right tackle for a banged up Juwan Taylor. It's just kind of the nature of the sport. And they have options now, which feels pretty good. A couple of comments I wanted to kind of stitch together here. Ronson Trey early said, curious to see if Wanya Morris competes at right tackle at all or if they slide him inside. And then Major Chip Hazard said, man, if Kingsley doesn't pan out as a solid left guard, we're screwed. This is the other part of this that I think is kind of delightful and kind of fascinating. The Chiefs could have, with Juwan Taylor being out, could have put Wanya Morris at right tackle today, left Jalen Moore at left tackle, and then had Simmons run with the twos. They also could have given Mike Caliendo the left guard spot and had Kingsley and Simmons both running with the twos, still learning to play next to each other, but a team down. Hunter Norzad could have been in that mix, right? And that's not what they did. They went with the rookie and the second-year player who played basically half a game of guard. Kingsley played the full game against the Broncos in Week 18, but they had so few offensive snaps that it was functionally like half an NFL game. The offense never stayed on the field. That, to me, does matter. The Chiefs are pushing for the Simmons-Kingsley duo as their best-case scenario, the ceiling, like I mentioned earlier. And then as Joshua Clayton says, the O-line could get real scary real fast if Kingsley and Simmons don't pan out. And I understand where you're coming from. Last year was derailed by offensive line nonsense. But if Kingsley and Simmons don't pan out, Jalen Moore and left guard Wanya Morris, which is just my hunch, I think is fine. I think that'll be okay. I was cool with Jalen Moore being this team's starting left tackle before they drafted Josh Simmons. I'm still cool with him being the starting left tackle now if that's what ends up happening. And at guard, going from Joe Thuney to anybody is a step down. Just impossible. You can't replace that way. But if it is Wanya, who I think has like a really interesting skill set for fitting in and being a potentially mauling guard candidate, or if it's whoever wins the battle between Mike Caliendo and Hunter Norzad. Caliendo had some rough reps in the playoffs. He was also playing next to a left tackle who is a left guard. Those issues exacerbated each other. I'm not willing to totally toast Mike Caliendo out of the league because he was in a very, very tough position throughout that stretch, just like Joe Thuney was at tackle. So I think what's fascinating is that the Chiefs have a higher ceiling on this plan A of offensive line work on the left side of the line. They have a higher ceiling there. And they still have a floor that's probably higher than last year's. Because last year's floor was, you just kept digging and digging and digging and digging. Cliff Johnson says earlier, I agree, but if the Chiefs do that, he can't flinch and bench Josh Simmons if he has 3, 4, 5 bad weeks. He's a rookie. I think that's something you have to walk the line on. There's something to that for sure. Where I think if you have 5 bad weeks, look, if he's the guy that if he loses you, if it doesn't have to be him. If one offensive lineman loses you 2 games, that's the difference between hosting the AFC Championship game or going to Buffalo or Baltimore or whatever. If you have an offensive lineman that loses you 2 games, it might be the difference between a divisional spot and a wild card spot. I don't think that's going to happen to the Chiefs, but just think about how narrow those margins are. So if Josh Simmons has 4 or 5 bad games, I think they will pull the plug. They shouldn't do what they did to Kingsley last year, though, which I think is kind of what you're getting at, Cliff. I'm sort of nitpicking on the details there just because I think the details do really matter. If Josh Simmons is the guy, and this is a good point that I certainly agree with, if Simmons is the guy, give him the guy treatment. Let him be your new left tackle. And if in week 6 it's been really bad, or it's been bad and no signs of getting better, you have other options there to try to stop that skid. But again, that's hopefully something that we're able to leisurely look ahead to as that time comes around. There was another one that I wanted to pick up here at some point. Joshua mentions, yeah, Taylor this year. It doesn't really matter how well he plays; he's gone. That's true. Juwan Taylor's going to play somewhere else in 2026, but this is the time to say, hey, someone should pay me to be a top level starting tackle like the Chiefs did a few years back. Pay me again. Maybe this is a year where the penalties slow down, or just put good stuff on tape, and he'll have another nice payday somewhere. But I agree. I think Simmons at left tackle and Jalen Moore at right tackle is the plan for next year as things go right now. Yeah, got to be careful with the timing of the quick hook. I think that's about right. Major Chip Hazard says, back in the days, we had Brian Waters, Casey Wigman, and Will Shields as our inside 3. Hoping we can build towards that type of O-line with this team. It's also kind of funny, Chip, and again, not to I'm just things that make me think. Last year, this team had the best interior offensive line in football. The interior. The guys you didn't mention there are really important. The tackles of those offensive lines. Sterling and I did this a couple of weeks ago, going through and drafting our all-time Chiefs offensive team. The Chiefs had as good of an interior O-line as you could pretty much ask for in the modern game last year. And overall, the offensive line still wasn't good enough. So you triple dip at tackle, and you've got 3 options there. It's really cool. Okay, let's spend a few minutes here on George Karlaftis. After getting I was going to not talk about the O-line that much, and then I realized how excited I was talking about the fact that there's like a really interesting left tackle, both battle and future and present going on, and it's the first day of training camp. That makes me feel pretty good. I wasn't sure if we were going to be totally locked in, totally wired for the first time the horn blew in St. Joe, and here we are. I'm feeling pretty good about it. Not as good as George Karlaftis, though. I'll say, as I said at the beginning, I was surprised when there was the Slick Rick report a few days before the actual deal, and then the actual deal comes out. I was surprised and, let's say, hesitant on a George Karlaftis extension, mainly because I'm begging the question, why now and how much? Those are the things that you ask in any contract negotiation that's happening really, really early. And for Karlaftis, it is happening really, really early. It is now turning into a 6-year contract for George Karlaftis because he was already under contract for 2 more years. So here's how I would summarize this, and I'll explain why there's going to be some negative intonation that I think is going to end up working out just fine. There's my spoiler for you for the take at the end. George Karlaftis is now a very good player getting great money. But he's getting great money while playing a premium position with a good long-term vision of where this team is going and the type of player that he is. So it's $105.5 million over 6 years, which averages about $17.6 million per year from now through 2030, which still sounds like kind of a fake deal. Kind of a fake year. I mean, 2030. What are we doing in 2030? I think you have to judge this contract a few different ways. One element of it is that the initial like 4-year contract thing was kind of terrifying because the Chiefs have good, sizable, like controllable sized cap hits these next couple of years. The final year of his rookie deal, 5th-year option. You have the option for the franchise tag after that. I don't think they were ever going to use the franchise tag on Karlaftis because it would have been basing him on that upper tier of defensive ends. And Karlaftis just hasn't been that guy in the NFL level to this point. I don't think that's controversial. He's a very good player. He's not Myles Garrett. And really, the problem is he's not tier 1, and he's not tier 2 in terms of game-wrecking takeover pass rushers. So I think you have to judge this contract in the most likely range of outcomes for George Karlaftis, which is that he is roughly, give or take 10%, roughly the same player he was last year over the next 5 to 6 years. There's a chance he takes a leap and becomes a tremendously better player, and there's a chance that he falls off a cliff, I guess. I don't think either of those are very likely. The most likely outcomes is that he's maybe it's a 5% boost for a few years, then it's a 5% decline for a few years, and that's his career. Nothing is guaranteed anywhere in football. But if you were going to tell me the Chiefs could secure 5 or 6 years of consistent, high floor, high snap count edge play for a similar APY or similar AAV, average annual value, as what his 5th-year option was going to be, which is about $15 million, I'd take it. I think that's a reasonable premium to pay for a good player at a premium position. If I was in Karlaftis' shoes, I would have been pretty curious to see what I could have gotten on the open market, but the open market for him was still going to be a couple of years away. I think I don't want to say he's maxed out as a player because I don't believe that, but I don't think that you're going to see him become, again, one of those game-wrecking players that opposing offenses spend all week planning for. That guy has been Chris Jones. I think next up in this year, I think the next guy that's going to get more of that is going to be Charles Omenihu. But the Chiefs had an opportunity here to say, hey, we're just not going to worry about one of our defensive end spots for 5 or 6 years. Because we just know we're going to have an Energizer Bunny who's the same guy every day, who performs at this level constantly, who is like a perfect scheme fit for Steve Spagnuolo. We're just going to lock that one in for about $17.5 million every year over those 6. I have no serious qualms with that. I will say that I think a little bit of the funny math that's happening here now is since it's an extension, you think about, what it would have been this year, and actually you average it out. And part of the advantage of having your draft picks hit is that you get to continue to underpay them during their rookie contract. And Karlaftis was a great value. And I don't think we've got his like annual cap hits. I refreshed it right before the show, kind of hoping that Spot Check might load it up. So I just don't have exactly how it's all broken down. I don't want to overcompensate, but it's a great deal because they paid him early. I think it's a fine deal. I think his agent should be just as happy as Brett Veach. And I think Karlaftis should be thrilled because he gets to continue playing with Chris Jones, continue playing on a perennial Super Bowl contender, and continue in a defense that really knows what he should be doing. They're still going to have to replace Chris Jones at some point during this George Karlaftis window. But you say, all right, well, maybe Felix works out, maybe he doesn't. Maybe Ashton Gelati works out, maybe he doesn't. We've got a couple of these investments in the position. We're going to be able to bolster the rotation. Probably the last year for Mike Dana here. Probably the last year for Charles Omenihu here. Again, those are both probablys. Omenihu's on a 1-year deal. Dana's got a year that they'll have to either cut him or do some real restructuring if they want to keep him around. You've got one of your building blocks there. If George Karlaftis is the best pass rusher on this team in 2028, I think that's a problem. Or maybe he's taken another leap that I wasn't expecting. But if you say, we're comfortable paying him once those numbers start to pop up down the line, $20 million a year to be our number 2 or 3 defensive lineman, depending on what happens post Jones, which still years down the road. I understand wanting to lock that in. More deals will come in. His number will seem better by comparison. I don't think it's going to be a ton of pass rushers who are constantly jumping over those numbers, but it's a middle class contract for let's say it's an upper middle class contract for an upper middle class defensive end. I think it is ultimately, I think it's fair. Don't think the Chiefs got a steal. Then they got a little bit of a discount by paying him early. I don't think George Karlaftis got a steal, but he got a lot of money by committing to the team early. I'm cool with that. In fact, of the sort of big contracts the Chiefs gave out to keep their guys around this offseason with George Karlaftis, Trey Smith, and Nick Bolton, I think the Karlaftis deal might be my favorite of those three. I haven't put that out anywhere yet. I'm just thinking about it, thinking if I wanted to launch that takeout for you today. Because at bare minimum, if George Karlaftis is a very good defensive end, I think he's worth the money. If Nick Bolton is a very good Mike linebacker, I'm not sure he is. If Trey Smith is a very good right guard, he's not worth that money. Now, I don't think that's a threat for Trey Smith. I think he's a click above that now and is going to hopefully continue to improve as a pass protector and grow his game that way. But Trey Smith's getting paid like the best interior offensive lineman in football. That's his line. Nick Bolton is being paid as the brain of the defense, and even his deal is at least short enough that I'm not still losing sleep over that one. They're not paying Karlaftis to be the best defensive end in football. They're not even paying him to be the best defensive lineman on this team. They're paying to keep him around. That's good with me. Ultimately, it makes sense. I do worry about the Trent McDuffie of it all. I do wonder when and how that deal is going to come together, or if. And the other thing that the Karlaftis deal does is it does free up the franchise tag for McDuffie at that point. And while Karlaftis's franchise tag would not have been a good use of cap space at that time, because it would have been paying him way more than he ends up signing on for, because he's not in that caliber, McDuffie is in that caliber. If they franchise tag him, and I hope this isn't how it goes, because I feel like it would be pretty contentious and probably the end of McDuffie's time in Kansas City. But even without getting let me fire up the spot track. Hold on. Even if you get kind of a little sad thinking about what this would be, I want to give you the timeline at least. McDuffie's under contract this year for a little more than $4 million. Then in 2026, his fifth-year option is $13.6 million. He's worth more than double that. He should probably be a $30 million player. As we've seen those deals come in, that's probably the beginning of the negotiation for McDuffie. $4.5 million this year, $16.5 million next year. Franchise tag in 2027 would still be, I think, less than $30 million, right? Just depending on, I guess if Surtain gets paid, that could raise it up a little bit. Let's say it's less than 30, though. It's going to be less than 30. You could have Trent McDuffie under contract, including this season, for 3 more years at a robbery level, a steal level, and a slight value, even on the franchise tag. For Karlaftis, this year was a great deal. Next year was a good deal. And then the franchise tag would have been a bad deal. So I think that's also part of the reason they probably went in this order. I hope the McDuffie deal is easy enough to just say, hey, we'll give you a 30.5 and just make you the new highest paid corner and get you in line here. I'm ready for that deal whenever the Chiefs want to sign it. I think McDuffie is worth that. But I understand the order of operations here, and it's a pretty stabilizing couple of moves that the Chiefs have made, which is also fascinating. I tweeted this out and talked about this a little bit, but looking down the line of the Chiefs salary cap hits, there is so much roster churn in this league. This is my last thing for you today. In 2027, but I just counted you out to, right? This year's 25. Next year's 26. Year after is 27. It's the year that Trent McDuffie would be playing under the franchise tag if they play that out. Not that far away. In 2027, The only Kansas City Chiefs who are almost guaranteed to be on the team in 2027, financially speaking, are Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey, George Karlaftis, and most of the draft picks from the last 2 years. That's it. Now, Bolton, Butker, and Noah Gray, excuse me, Nick Bolton, Harrison Butker, and Noah Gray are under contract through 2027. And I think at least Butker and Gray's contracts are structured in a way where I assume they'll be on the team in 2027. But those are all 3 deals that in 27 have low dead money and relatively high cap savings, which I point out just because those guys all just signed extensions very recently, and the guarantees are short. It's not for long. I know it's overplayed, but it's true. So with that kind of turnover, with so much uncertainty, with so much roster churn, you also want to pay the right guys when you're making these long-term commitments. I lied a second ago. Here's my last thing. If you haven't seen it, a handful of people have tweeted out the clips. You can watch the whole pressers if you want. Trey Smith was asked about the experience of signing his contract extension up in St. Joe today. And he started to answer and got choked up for a while and eventually powered through some heavy emotions, talking about the promises he made to his mom before she passed away and when he was, I think he said 15, that I'll graduate, make the NFL, all of this. And then he signs this contract look, Trey Smith has made it in every metric you could want up other than the money. He signs this contract and all of those emotions come flooding back to watch him in different ways, to watch him and Karlaftis talk about getting paid. You can't, it's complicated. The NFL is complicated. Team building is complicated. I don't think you're ever going to have a team of 53 football players and believe that every one of those 53 is just like the coolest dude and the best hang of all time. The fact, though, that the Chiefs have this offseason, the guys they've chosen to retain, and this is not a slight on anybody anywhere else, it's because Justin Reed also appears to be an absolute gem of a guy, and they let him walk this offseason. But for all of this money, and for a lot of this guaranteed money, to go to Nick Bolton, Trey Smith, and George Karlaftis a year after paying Creed Humphrey, and even Noah Gray last offseason, last preseason too. The Chiefs have had these guys in the building for a number of years, and they've been able to be confident and say, this is the type of player we are willing to give this kind of money to. This is the type of player who deserves the payday, who's going to be the same guy after the payday, and has earned it every day in this building, not just off of what somebody else said or the tape we saw on the field or things we've heard from outside from bringing in a free agent. I think there's value to that, and I think it is pretty cool to have the guys getting rewarded this offseason be kind of in that class of guys who have just earned everything in Kansas City as a member of this team and appear to just be some of the most consistent dudes in the building, in a building that really, really values intensity and consistency the way the Chiefs do. It's been a long offseason in a lot of ways. Today has been a whirlwind. Welcome back to what I am calling the official beginning of football season. Training camp has begun in St. Joe. I can't remember where Sterling Holmes is right now, but that's not important. We have successfully completed another edition of Tuesdays with Sterling without Sterling Holmes. I am Joshua Brisco. I think we'll get the big man back again next week. I'll talk to you then. Until then, I am out.